Daniel Cormier just weighed in on this really intense situation between Sean Strickland and his coach Eric Nicksick, and honestly, it's pretty heartbreaking to see this playing out in public. So here's what happened. After Strickland lost his rematch with Dricus du Plessis, Coach Nicksick was clearly frustrated. I mean, who wouldn't be? He watched his fighter basically ignore crucial advice between rounds. Nicksick then made this bold statement about only wanting to train world champions going forward, and DC had some really strong feelings about that. DC didn't hold back. He said, while it's totally fine to have high standards, you just don't go around saying you only want to work with champions. Think about it. In this brutal sport, not everyone can wear the gold, right? DC was worried this kind of public statement could really hurt the morale of other fighters in the gym. But here's the thing. DC also totally gets where Nicksick is coming from. Imagine being in those corners, giving your fighter the guidance they need, and watching them completely ignore it on such a massive stage. That's gotta be absolutely gut-wrenching for a coach. DC made this really powerful point. If there's tension between a fighter and their coach, it should never, ever play out in public, especially not during a fight. I mean, what's even the point of having a coach in your corner if you're not going to listen to them? It's all about that sacred bond of trust and respect between fighter and coach, especially when everything's on the line. Now,
The only area that I think Coach Nicksick was wrong was, I want to coach world champs. Not everybody's going to be a world champ. You don't get to coach all world champions. You coach guys that might get to the Contender Series and lose. So you don't get to coach just world champions. I get the thought of what he's saying, but not everybody gets there, right? So to make that your goal, but I don't know publicly if you say that. But any great coach will have words for their athlete. And I walked up to Eric and I go, it was the same fight. And you could see the frustration. You could see the frustration in between rounds. You could actually see Sean kind of walking away from Eric as Eric was giving instructions in between rounds. Now, if these guys have a severed relationship, it can't be recognized on the world's biggest stage. It can't be still on display when you make that walk.
Now, let's talk about this fascinating situation with Belal Muhammad. This is honestly such a beautiful example of loyalty in the fight game. Belal just revealed something pretty incredible. He's willing to vacate his UFC title if his friend and training partner, Islam Makhachev, decides to move up in weight. I mean, how often do you see that kind of sacrifice in this sport? During this really candid interview with Barstool Chicago, Belal opened up about everything, from his life in Chicago to his experiences training with the legendary Khabib Nurmagomedov. But things got really interesting when they brought up the possibility of fighting Makhachev. You should have seen how the MMA community reacted when Islam didn't completely rule out fighting Belal in the future. They were practically foaming at the mouth, mocking Belal for his stance. But here's what makes this so powerful. Belal didn't hesitate for a second. He shut down any talk of fighting Islam, and his words were just so raw and honest. Listen to this. He said, "I would never fight Islam because that's different for both me and him. We've trained together, and when you're sweating with somebody, bleeding with somebody, and training like that, it's just a different relationship. Doesn't that just hit you right in the feels?" He even went further, saying it wouldn't be about money for either of them. Instead of fighting his friend, Belal's ready to make this huge move. He's willing to go up to 185 pounds and let Islam take the 170-pound division if that's what happens. He's confident about it too, saying he walks around at 190 pounds anyway, so making 185 wouldn't be a problem. He's been training with bigger guys and feels like 185 might actually be one of the easier divisions, except for the champion Khamzat Chimaev. Now, this next part is absolutely wild. Eric Nicksick shared some absolutely gripping details about sparring sessions between Sean Strickland and Francis Ngannou. This is the kind of stuff that shows you what these fighters are really made of. According to Nicksick, Strickland actually seeks out sparring with Francis because, and this is deep, he feels fear when facing him. But here's the incredible part. He embraces that fear, drawing from some really tough childhood experiences with his father. It's like he's turning his trauma into strength, using that fear as fuel. These sparring sessions sound absolutely intense. Picture this. Francis usually holds back, but the moment Strickland starts swinging hard, Ngannou has to remind him who he's dealing with and puts him in his place. Sergey Roman.
Sean will spar Francis.
Stop.
I swear to God.
You tell me Sean Strickland spars Francis Ngannou.
Hand to God. But Sean says the same thing. He's like, listen, I spar him because there's no other person that can put the fucking fear of God in me the way that Francis can. So it makes you spar a particular way where like you got to be on your fucking game. If Francis wanted just to fucking kill him, I'm sure he could.
Have they?
Sean will start winging shit at Francis's head, and then Francis will be like, all right, motherfucker, and then have to show him what's...
And it gets even more intense. Sergey Romanov, one of the Russian welterweights training with Nicksick, shared this absolutely brutal story about their sparring. Apparently, Ngannou landed this devastating liver shot that dropped Strickland. Now, most people would probably call it quits right there, but not Strickland. Even though he was clearly in pain, he got up cursing at Ngannou, trying to get right back in his face. Romanov described it perfectly. Strickland got hit with a liver shot pretty hard, twice in a row actually. It dropped him for a moment, and he was pissed, yelling, "Expletive you, expletive you," as he tried to get back in Francis's face and keep the pressure on. Francis just smirked through it all, completely unfazed, but you've got to admire Strickland's heart. He was ready to keep going, even though he was clearly hurting badly. Let's wrap this up with some explosive news about a potential lightweight showdown. Chael Sonnen is absolutely pumped about the possibility of seeing Ilia Topuria face off against Paddy the Baddy Pimblett at 155 pounds. And honestly, who can blame him? Paddy's been stirring the pot again, reigniting this heated feud that started back in 2022. He just went after the featherweight champ in this fiery interview, calling Topuria some choice words and making it clear he'd love nothing more than to fight him if Ilia moves up to lightweight. But Paddy didn't stop there. He took shots at Ilia's path to the title, suggesting he had it easier because Alex Volkanovski had already cleaned out the division. He even questioned how El Matador would handle the bigger guys at 155, suggesting he might struggle with the power up there. Chael Sonnen is absolutely loving this potential matchup, and his take on it is just perfect. He pointed out how the genuine bad blood between these two just adds this whole other level of excitement. In his YouTube video, Sonnen broke it down beautifully. Paddy the Baddy is willing to welcome El Matador to 155 pounds. Now, it's not Paddy's first choice because Ilia is not a big enough name, but he will do it because of the hand sanitizer incident. He wanted to give him a beating back then, so he will just delay that desire to whip Ilia until now. Sonnen continued with this amazing perspective. From a performance standpoint, that's great. That is great stuff by Paddy to declare that he is willing to do a favor for the world champion. Stay in your weight class, fight for a world title, activate the participation clause of your contract, the only clause that you can have in MMA that can make you millions of dollars in one night. Leave all of that to come up to 155 over a personal feud where no title is on the line, no legacy is on the line, but we do have this incident with the hand sanitizer. And you know what? They do have unfinished business. I remember that night very well. Thanks for joining us for today's MMA News Roundup. There's never a dull moment in this sport, and we're here to bring you all the latest drama, excitement, and incredible stories from the world of mixed martial arts. Keep following for more daily updates from the fight world.